Every other week, there is a new list telling you the 20 AI tools you absolutely have to be using right now. I have watched a lot of those lists and I have signed up for far too many of the tools on them. And here is the honest thing nobody in those videos seems to admit. Almost none of them survive. You try a tool, you are excited for about 3 days, and then you quietly never open it again. So I am not going to give you another top 10. Instead, I am going to show you the handful of AI tools I actually open every single day to get real work done, the ones that earned a permanent spot in my setup, and then the ones I genuinely tried, wanted to like, and ended up quietly dropping. No affiliate links, no hype, just what is left standing after a year of real use. Let me start with what actually survives. Before I name anything, I want to be clear about what I mean by survives. A tool survives in my setup if I would feel it the day it disappeared. Not the day I am bored and looking for something new to play with, the day it is gone and my actual work gets slower or worse. By that test, the list is short. It is way shorter than my install history would suggest, and almost everything that survived has one thing in common. It does one specific job, it does it reliably, and it slots into work I was already doing. The tools that died were almost always the ones that wanted me to change how I work to fit them. So keep that frame in mind as I go through the keepers because the why matters far more than the name. The first keeper is a strong writing model. The one I lean on hardest is a good large language model for drafting and tightening text. And I want to be careful here because this is the most overhyped category in the entire space. I do not use it to think for me, and I do not paste its output and ship it blind. What it actually does is get me from a blank page to a rough draft in a fraction of the time, and then help me cut and sharpen what I already wrote. The blank page used to cost me real hours, now it costs me minutes. That is the whole win, and it is enough. I treat it like a fast, tireless first drafter, not an oracle, and I read every line it gives me with a skeptical eye. It gets things wrong, it pads, it occasionally invents a fact, and catching that is my job, not its. But used that way, it is the single biggest time saver in my whole setup. I pay for it, it is a metered cost, and it is genuinely small at the volume I write. It earns its spot because the time it saves me every single week is obvious and large. If it vanished tomorrow, I would feel it within an hour. The second keeper is a voice I can trust. The next tool I open constantly is a text-to-speech voice. Everything you are hearing right now runs through one. For a faceless channel, a narration voice that sounds steady and human is not a nice to have, it is the entire product. I went through a lot of options here and most of them sounded fine for one sentence and then fell apart over a 10-minute script. The one I kept is the one that stayed consistent across a whole narration, take after take, without me babysitting it. It is a metered paid service and the cost per video is small enough that it never factors into whether I make something. It survives because it removed a job I genuinely could not do well myself, and it does that job the same way every time. Consistency is the feature. The third keeper is local image generations. The third one lives entirely on my own machine. I generate images locally on my own graphics card. Thumbnails, simple visuals, rough concept art, all of it runs on hardware sitting in my room. Now I want to be honest about why this one survived, because it is not because it is the best quality available. The hosted image services are often sharper. It survived because I generate a lot of images, and doing it locally means the marginal cost of one more is basically nothing beyond a little electricity. When you run something hundreds of times, that math changes everything. It also means I am never waiting on someone else's queue and never wondering where my prompts went. It earns its place through sheer volume. If I only made one image a month, this would not be on the list and I would just use a hosted service and forget about it. The fourth keeper is an agent wired into my tools. This is the one that took me the longest to actually trust. An agent setup that can read my files, run small commands and chain a few steps together without me holding its hand for every click. For a long time I thought these were a demo toy. Impressive in a video, useless in real work. What changed my mind was wiring one into the tools I already use so it works inside my actual setup instead of some sandbox. Now it handles the boring multi-step chores. Renaming a batch of files, pulling a number out of a log, kicking off a job and checking the result. These are the tasks that are too small to be interesting and too frequent to ignore, and they used to quietly eat my time all week. I still read what it does, every time, because trust is earned slowly and lost instantly. When it goes off track, and it does, I want to catch it before it touches anything that matters. But it survives because it removes the dull glue work that used to eat my afternoons. The key was narrow scope. I do not ask it to run my whole operation. I ask it to do small, checkable things, the kind where I can glance at the result and know in a second whether it got it right. The fifth keeper is plain boring scripting, and the last keeper barely counts as an AI tool at all, which is exactly why it survives. It is plain scripting and automation, little scripts that move files, rename things, stitch steps together, and run on a schedule without me. Here is the uncomfortable truth I keep relearning. A huge amount of what people reach for a fancy AI tool to do is actually just a 5-line script. The AI sometimes helps me write the script faster, sure, but the thing doing the work in production is boring, predictable code that does the same thing every time and never surprises me. The flashiest part of my setup is not an AI product at all. It is a folder full of small scripts that quietly do their job, and honestly that is the most reliable thing I own. Now the ones I quietly dropped, so that is what survived. Now let me be just as honest about what did not, because the graveyard is much bigger than the keeper list and the reasons are the actually useful part. These are not bad tools, most of them are genuinely impressive, they just did not survive contact with my real repetitive daily work. And the patterns in why they failed are worth more than any single name. The first kind I dropped is the novelty toys. The biggest category by far is the novelty tools, the ones I signed up for because a demo blew me away, used hard for about a week and then never touched again. An AI tool that turned text into little videos, one that summarized every web page I opened, a fancy note system that promised to think alongside me. They were all genuinely cool, but the excitement was the whole experience. Once the novelty wore off, none of them were solving a problem I actually had on a normal Tuesday. And that is the tell. If the only reason you are using a tool is that it is new and clever, you will stop. Fun is not the same as useful, and I keep having to relearn that with my own credit card. The second kind I dropped was too fiddly. The second group I dropped were the ones that were too fiddly for what they gave back. Tools that needed constant prompting, careful setup, and a lot of hand-holding to get a halfway decent result. I had one for generating images with incredible control, but getting anything usable took so much tweaking that I dreaded opening it. The output was great when it worked, the problem was the effort to get there never dropped. A tool that demands a lot of attention every single time is borrowing against the time it is supposed to save you. If I have to fight it on every use, the math stops working, no matter how good the best case looks. The third kind did not fit my workflow. The third reason is the quietest one, and it killed some genuinely excellent tools. They simply did not fit how I work. I tried a few all-in-one AI platforms that wanted to be the place where everything happened. The writing, the images, the organizing, the planning, all in one shiny dashboard. And every one of them asked me to leave the setup I already had and move into theirs. The tool might have been better in isolation, but it could not talk to the rest of my pipeline, so using it meant copying things in and out by hand all day. A great tool that lives on its own island is often worse in practice than an okay tool that plugs straight into everything else you do. And sometimes a simpler thing just won. And the last reason is almost funny. Sometimes I dropped an AI tool because something dumber and simpler just did the job better. I replaced one clever AI scheduler with a plain calendar and a recurring reminder. I replaced an AI summarizer with the habit of actually reading the thing. I replaced a slick AI file organizer with a sensible folder structure and one small script. The simpler thing was more reliable. I understood exactly what it did, and it never had an off day or a weird hallucination. The lesson I keep getting hit with is that the goal was never to use AI. The goal was to get the work done. And sometimes the boring tool wins clean. So how do I actually decide? So with all that, how do I actually decide whether to keep a tool or cut it? Over time, it has boiled down to 3 honest questions, and I run every tool through them. The first question is simple. Does it save me real time every single week, not just once in an impressive demo? If I cannot point to the hours, it goes. The second question is whether it fits the pipeline I already have. If using it means leaving my setup and shuffling things around by hand, the friction usually eats the benefit. The third question is whether I can actually trust it. Can I check its work? Does it behave the same way twice? Will it quietly break something while I am not looking? A tool I cannot trust is not a time saver. It is a new thing to worry about. Time, fit, and trust. If a tool cannot clear all 3, it does not get a permanent spot, no matter how good the launch video was. A warning about chasing tools. And before I wrap up, I have to say the thing I most need to hear myself. Chasing new tools is one of the most comfortable forms of procrastination there is. It feels productive. You are reading about AI, you are testing things, you are optimizing your setup, But a lot of the time, it is just a very sophisticated way of avoiding the actual work. I have absolutely lost whole afternoons setting up a tool to save myself 10 minutes a week. The setup felt like progress. It was not. The people getting the most out of AI right now are usually not the ones with the most tools. They are the ones who found a few that work and then went quiet and actually used them. The tool is never the point. The work is the point, and no amount of perfect tooling will do the work for you. So that is the honest list. A strong writing model, a voice I trust, local image generation, a narrow agent wired into my own tools, and a pile of boring scripts. 5 things that survived, where dozens did not. And the ones that survived all earned it the same way. They saved real time, they fit how I already work, and I could trust them. Everything else was novelty, friction, or a worse fit than the simple thing it replaced. If you take one idea from this, let it be this. Stop collecting tools and start keeping only the ones you would miss. If you want more honest, no hype breakdowns of how I actually run AI day to day, subscribe and follow along. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.